Loss comes in many forms, and usually in unexpected ways. It can be devastating, leaving you facing an uphill struggle to go on with life without someone you thought would always be there. But life does go on, and even in the deepest despair, we can find hope. Welcome to Grief Relief with your hosts, Drs. Gloria and Heidi Horsley, brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation, helping people find hope after loss. And now here's Dr. Gloria and Dr. Heidi.
Welcome to our Open to Hope show. I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley with my co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
We've got a great show for you today on transforming after loss. What a big topic. How do you transform after a loss? We've got some guests today that are going to talk to you about what they've gone on to do with their lives after some tremendous losses. Right, Heidi?
Yes, exactly, Mom. We're going to talk about how do you transform your life after loss and after the death of a child, and how do you find hope again?
Absolutely. We're going to have Ann Cadalia on the show today. You want to talk a little bit about Ann, Heidi, because you know her well.
I love Ann. I've known Ann for about 10 years. We served together on the board of directors for the Compassionate Friends, and Ann is a social worker, and she lost her 5-year-old daughter, Priya.
In an automobile hit and run, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it wasn't hit and run. She'll talk about it. A young man hit her and then, kind of moved away, and they picked him up. And anyway, we'll talk about that.
And can I just say one thing about Ann? She is such a positive person, and so is her daughter, Ronnie. And, I mean, you just think about everything she's been through, and she is one of the most positive people I know.
Absolutely, and some of the things she's done are really great, and we'll be talking about that. And then we're going to have Susan Whitmore on, and Susan is just an amazing person that I think is going to inspire everyone. She certainly inspires me. She's gone on after the death of her daughter, Erica, to the sinus cancer. She's moved on to do some wonderful things, start a foundation, and it's just really an inspiration to everyone about what they can do in transforming their lives.
Yeah, she's the president of Grief Haven and the founder, and she is also a grief expert.
Yeah, so great. And then we're going to have, I want to show the book, Michael J. Davis, and he has written this book, wonderful book called Angel Seed, and he is going to sing for us. And I love the song, Heidi, because I will, what's the name of the song?
It's, oh my gosh.
I think it's I Will Friend You.
Yes, it's something like I Will Friend You. And well, I like the words because it's about how we are friends in the best of times and in the worst of times. And I think that is really important because oftentimes after a loss, we lose some of our friends.
All right. And Michael's gone on to do many things in his life and written a lot of books. And you can go to michaeljdavis.com and you can hear this song, I Will Friend You. And also, he's got some wonderful things and inspirational things on his site, so I hope you'll go there. And we'll be closing the show with the song by Michael. Well, let's get started with the show and talking to Ann.
Okay. Hi, Ann.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for having me on the show. I just admired. Thank you. Thank you very much. I admire you both so much as well.
Well, we certainly admire you and everything you've done, and it's been wonderful to know you through the years. So talk a little bit about what happened with your daughter and your family. You have another daughter, as Heidi said, Ronnie.
Yes.
And your husband's from India.
Yes. So it's, so we kind of have a mixed cultural family as well. And my daughter, Priya, and Priya, as I mentioned, her name means beloved in my husband's language. And
I love that.
yeah. She was with my husband, and one of his friends was also his partner in the store at the time. And the kids were walking across the street. They were on their way I think, to a karate. One of the boys had a karate lesson, and they were really. Priya was so excited about going and with the kids, and she was just went across the street, and they were all crossing the street. They had the green light, and a speeding driver, it was a young person, was driving recklessly and hit her. And then I think I told you this, what happened was he hit her. He had been fleeing from another hit and run because the person was going to call the police. And so he fled, driving in a somewhat residential area, about 60, 70 miles an hour, they were saying. And then ran through the red light. And
And you ended up in court and
we did end
went
up in
throughout
court.
the whole thing.
He did plead out, which is very common. As we know, they take a plea. And because he had another charge against him. And what I did go to court for, we didn't have to go through the trial, which I think was somewhat of a blessing. But I did go to the sentencing hearing. And I remember I got up and spoke at the hearing. They give you an opportunity to
The
give
impact statement, right?
They give you an opportunity to do a victim impact statement. Now, that's something I really remember a lot, and it was pretty profound. I mean, and the opportunity to get up there and face the person. And I remember my husband, much like today, my husband, my mom, and my sister were in the audience, and I was speaking, I didn't even notice them, but after I left, they said that the three of them were crying their eyes out the whole time I was speaking. So.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this. How did you transform yourself? I mean, there's got to be a forgiveness factor in this. When you talk about this, I know people that have had these kind of automobile accidents and kind of things that's been another person that's caused the harm. How do you get into forgiveness, and have you transformed yourself with this?
Well, I mean, I realized shortly after I didn't want, any connection really. After I did I think after even especially doing the statement, I really was able to let it go completely. And so I just completely let it, and also understanding that he was a young person who didn't really, I mean, the one thing that I had was that this person did not get up that morning and say, I'm going to go out and kill a kid.
Right.
It just was something that happened. And I realized that I had to forgive this person. I had to forgive them partly because of my spiritual beliefs, but also psychologically to let go of it, and not to carry that burden with me, and allow that person to have that much power over my life. So that person it's really easy for me to totally let go of that person. So I didn't do a lot of what some people do, and maybe for whatever reason, they may feel it's important to them to follow the person, go to the parole hearings or whatever, but I was able to let go of all of that.
That's amazing, yeah.
And
you're, a lot of people, when this kind of thing happens, they harbor a lot of anger for years, and you're not like that at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, I don't mean to be, in this particular instance, it's easy to let go of it. I can't say that I'm so sanctimonious, because certainly I get angry, and I really appreciate the things you say to me, but said about me in the beginning of the show, but like everybody, I have anger. It's interesting because some of these big things, it's kind of able to get up and let go of the anger or hostility, but sometimes it's the small things that I tend to hold on to longer.
So what have you found has worked in transforming your life and in finding hope again?
Well, shortly after Priya died, I decided to go back to get my master's degree. I was working as a social worker, but I decided that I wanted to do that both on a personal level and on a professional level. So that's been very helpful. I went back and got a master's in counseling. I still do social work, but I also, what I've done is to try to give back, because I find that with giving back, it helps me to heal. And so I do some grief counseling part-time. I volunteer, and I've also volunteered and worked for the crisis center, answering crisis calls.
Now, how long has it been since your daughter was killed?
She was killed in 1999, so it's been 14 years.
Okay.
So it's a gradual process.
Okay, I was going to say, how were you that very first year? I mean,
First couple of years are difficult. Like
Okay.
I said, it's it's a matter of getting one foot in front of the other. And I've found compassionate friends to be very helpful over the years. I went to the first meeting very soon after she died, and I've really found them to be beneficial.
and now you run a chapter, and now
Well,
you're
not
on
a
the
chapter,
national board.
I've been a chapter
Been
leader.
a chapter leader,
I've
and
been a
now you're on
chapter-
the board
and
with
I'm on
Heidi.
the board.
Of the Compassionate Friends. Well, that's great. And there are, what, 640 chapters in the United States now?
660, isn't it, Heidi?
Yeah.
660.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous organization. I remember once going, maybe about a year and a half after Priya died, I went to my first conference. I think it was a regional conference. And I remember Rich Elder,
Yes,
very
of course.
wonderful person. I remember him speaking about finding joy after the loss of a child. And it was only about, as you well know, it was a little over a year since Priya died, which for some people seems like a long time, but as we well know, that is not that long.
Yeah.
And I remember, how can you ever find joy? But I listened to him, and I held it in my heart, and I held what he said, and it was so wonderful. He said something about going on and finding joy in your life can bring honor to your child. And I tried to do that I've tried to live my life that way, to bring as much honor to Priya's memory as I can.
Oh, well, thank you, Anne. That's great. And we'll be talking to you again in a minute, because we're going to introduce Suzanne Whitmore, and then we will talk to you some more with Suzanne.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ann.
Suzanne, come on out and say hello.
Hey, Susan.
Suzanne, I called you Suzanne. That's okay. Hi, Susan. Come on in and have a seat.
Thank you.
Another one of our amazing women who have gone on to transform their lives, Heidi.
Susan definitely is, and has this fabulous organization that she started, which she'll tell us about.
Right.
In
Yeah.
honor of her daughter.
Tell us a little bit about what happened with Erica. And I know she got sinus cancer. She was living in Canada,
Correct.
going to school, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and she
correct.
was engaged to a
Correct.
Canadian.
Yes.
Yeah, and then she got sick and ended up with sinus cancer.
Yeah. She ended up with a very rare tumor in her sinuses. Less than 200 people have ever had it. And the whole Canadian system didn't know what to do, and so they recommended we bring her back to the United States for treatment, which we did. We had to find a teaching hospital that had treated someone with that cancer. Fortunately, it was UCLA, near where we live. And she went through a lot of chemo and radiation, almost died twice from the treatment. Very intensive, awful. And we had her for a year, and she died on May 30th, 2002.
Wow. Well, talk a little bit about the finances, because I'm just thinking about the devastation for people who have these kinds of illnesses. Especially, you got caught in a really unusual situation with her having Canadian insurance, right?
Erica was living in Canada with her fiance. He's Canadian, and we had to pay for her to have health coverage there. But she was an adult, so we paid for her coverage there, but we didn't keep coverage for her in the United States. When she got this cancer, we had to bring her back here very quickly and start treatment. So we sold our home. Somebody had been wanting to buy our home, and we sold our home really fast, and we used all of the money to pay for her treatment. And I cashed out my retirement, used that, credit cards, everything. You can really go broke in the United States if you don't have health insurance. So it was devastating.
Oh, what a thing to get caught in. So not only did you have your child dying of this terrible illness, but
Right.
you also were financially devastated.
We were, yeah.
And feeling like, okay, if we put all this money into this, she will live.
Right. And, of course, I'd do it again. And I don't care.
Yeah,
I
of
would do
course.
anything. I mean, it doesn't matter whether,
And you did do everything you could.
Exactly. Of course you would.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Your child.
So this happened, and then what did you do? I mean, did you immediately think about what you could do for others, or
Yeah.
how you were going to pull yourself together? Or how long did it take? I think
It was really in the 3rd month after she died, and I was just, sobbing and crying and giving grief a voice, which is something that I think is really important. Let it out however it works for you. And so I was just crying myself to sleep one night, and as I was falling asleep, I sort of had this knowing that there was this video I was going to do, and I knew everything that had to go into it. And I remember at the time thinking, that's such a great idea. And I don't, I'm not a religious person, but I tell you, it came from some other place. And that was the first project we worked on. It's called Portraits of Hope. And
that's on your website, right?
yeah, you
So
can buy
people
that.
can-
It's a documentary film that follows the lives of people over 30 years who've lost a child, and we're ready to do the next one for siblings. And then we applied for the nonprofit status and started Grief Haven. And the first thing we did was we put up our website, and that website has just been growing and growing and growing and growing. And after that, I became a grief specialist. I left my legal career 3 years ago, and I do Grief Haven full time now.
Now, and I think one thing that is important here is that also Erica was your only child.
Correct.
So that's a challenge in and of itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm glad you brought that up. In the work that I do, a lot of times people want to talk about that. And I try to tell people, not only from my own experience, but the people that I've worked with, the grief isn't any different. No, regardless of how your child died, the grief that I see people in is the same. It's the memories you have to learn to live with that are different. And in my case, there isn't anybody to call me mom. There's no future. There's not going to be grandchildren. There's not going to be certain things. So the loss of an only child is different in some ways, definitely different in some ways.
Now, I know some people get together in community with other people who don't, or well, I've heard them called parents with no living children. So do you feel like that you need the designation as parents with no living children?
Absolutely not. Okay. From my experience of working with people, you know, it doesn't matter how old their child was. It doesn't matter how their child died. It doesn't even matter what the relationship was with the child. Erica and I were best friends, and we were very close. Some people are estranged from their children when they die, which is a complication on top, as you already know. So I don't feel that there's a difference. I just think the grief, the community of grieving with other people who understand or get it is what matters.
Now, you knew that she had cancer for a year, right?
Yes.
So in your experience as a grief counselor, have you seen any different with somebody like Anne who has a sudden death as compared with you having a loss over time, or, you know, having the, of course, I don't know. Sometimes I think, and I don't know what your thought is, I feel that when the doctor says they're dead, I mean, you always have hope.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's the end of hope.
Exactly.
So, you know, some people say, oh, it's worse to have it this way or that way. Do you have a thought on that?
I do, and it's something that I deal with a lot. And I've done a lot of research on it and done a lot of thinking about it, and had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. And, you know, there's the people who say goodbye and think they're going to see them and that's it, it's over. And then there's me who watched my child suffer for a year. And again, I think the only difference is in what you have to figure out how you're going to go on and deal with. In other words, I have lots of memories of Erica suffering and all of that, and the people who lost their, but I had a lot of time to say things to her and share with her and all of that. The people who lost their child very suddenly have their regrets. They have certain regrets. I didn't get to say goodbye, I didn't get to see him again. One thing I have noticed that's different is it seems to be harder for their brain to understand that that child is really gone. I mean, I watched Erica take her last breath, and I knew.
And it sounds like you said things to her, and
Yes.
and were there and kind of had closure a little bit, as much as you can. I know at the end you may have still thought she's not going to die.
Oh, absolutely. Even
Yeah.
after she died, I kept going back in there thinking she was breathing.
Wow.
But the thing I want to say, I just want to impart, is that I think that it's dangerous to start doing comparisons.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't
Whose
work.
loss is worse, et cetera, when they're all
And how can
horrible.
you measure someone else's loss? I see the
Yes.
pain in the groups I do.
Yeah.
And so I think comparing is just something that all grief people should stay away from.
So let me ask you two together. You're both counselors, and you're both kind of in the grief field. What do you see in the people that you've worked with is the biggest thing that stops people from transforming their lives that you two have and moving on and whatever? Either one of you. Anne, do you have a thought about that? What stops people? I mean, where do you think people get
one
most
of the things
stuck?
I hear people say, and sometimes people are afraid sometimes to, they feel like if they're moving on, they're letting go of their child. Have you ever encountered that?
All the time.
They think that in fact, I've heard people say, if they laugh or have a good time, it's disrespectful to their child.
Exactly.
And I think some of us do fall into that where we feel that way, and it's hard to get over to say, you know, and I don't like to use cliches like, well, your child would have wanted it, because that's just, that's not exactly make a lot of sense, but that it is okay to go on and find joy. It's absolutely okay. And to give themselves permission to do that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Susan?
I would say a few things. I would say, you know, some of the recommendations that I make, and you can actually go on the griefhaven.org website to see this whole list I have of things I recommend after a child dies, or any loss at all, but with the child specifically, is I'll just pick out a few that I really like the most. You have to seek out somebody who is, you know, not your husband, not your best friend. You have to find somebody who you can turn to, because if you're always relying on, let's say, your spouse or the father of the child, when two people are at the bottom, it's really hard to help each other. The other thing is you absolutely have to partner with this grief. Try everything once. Just do it. If you think in your mind, I don't want to go to a grief group, I don't want to hear other people telling their sad stories, go. You can always leave if it's too hard, but you'll never know what's going to help you. The other thing is you have to rebuild your life without your child, and you need to learn how to bring that child with you into your new life, and that takes hard work. That's what I mean about partnering with grief. And the other thing is educate yourself, read books, learn what grief is about, all the latest information on grief. The Grieving Brain, there's all kinds of wonderful things going on right now.
So continuing bonds with your children, you both have done this in new and different ways.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I like this idea of education too. There's so
Yeah,
much on
me
the net,
too.
isn't there?
It's
There
absolutely
is.
very good.
Yes.
So many things to read and so many different opinions and thoughts and YouTube and, you know, a lot going on.
And like you were both saying, different things work for different people.
Absolutely.
I love the idea of trying something once and seeing if it works, and if
that's
it
a
doesn't,
great idea.
doing something else.
And finding, it's kind of like what I say to people, what you were saying, it's finding ways to incorporate your child into your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I sometimes look at it because Priya was very young when she died, but I can still find many things many ways to incorporate her and keep part of her still alive with me.
Oh, we do it all the time. Every night before we go to sleep, I tell my husband I love him. He says I love you, and then we say we love you, Erica, and we say it out loud. When we go to Starbucks, where they say what's your name, I say my name's Erica, E-R-I-K-A, and then when they say Erica, your coffee's ready. It's wonderful. It's great.
Erica's like, thank you, Mom.
Yes, exactly.
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So we want to keep them alive in our lives. It's very
Well,
important.
and sometimes we hold on to the pain longer than we need to because the pain is our only connection
Absolutely.
that
I
we
think
still
that's
have.
absolutely.
So finding new ways to connect and letting go of that pain.
It's what people say sometimes, their pain and their grief are the only way they can love their child. They feel that way sometimes, that if they let go of any of that pain, they're letting go of the love.
Well, that's very true. When they're in that acute pain, that really intense pain, they feel very close to their child. So they start feeling like their child's drifting away when they don't have the pain. That's why I said you have to create a new relationship with them that's not about their bodies. And that's really hard to do. That takes a lot of time. And you know, if somebody told you had cancer, you would start reading about it and learning everything about it. You wouldn't just say, oh, well, I have cancer. But when you're grieving, people just kind of sit back and say, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You have to be proactive.
That's
I,
a good
I
point.
like that, educating yourself, because sometimes people are like, oh, no two people grieve alike, which may be true. But, you know, I say to people, there are some commonalities about grief. I mean, you don't want to go to a grief counselor or a counselor and have them say, well, my child died, and they say, oh, gee, everybody grieves differently. You know, I mean, there's got to be something, try reading this. There are some commonalities. There are some things. Try to find people that have some of the same ideas you do. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your future. You are with Compassionate Friends. You're on the national board.
Yes.
What the next conference is? What, in Chicago?
Chicago, and I'm awaiting going to my first actual board meeting in Chicago. It's coming up the end of next month, so that's pretty exciting.
Okay, great. And also, I hear you're taking on a whole new adventure, which is
Oh yes,
becoming a yoga
Yes,
teacher.
you know, I think another positive step. That's like what you said about trying everything. I first started. I was taking ballet lessons for a while. That was a way of incorporating Priya into my life because she was my little ballerina. And then I said, well, you know, I'm not very limber, so I started taking yoga, and I've now taken
And now you're-
yoga, and now I'm in a yoga teacher training.
Good
so
for you, on and upward.
So it's,
And as a tribute to your daughter.
and it's all connected to Priya,
Yeah,
and
it sounds like it.
and I think it's another way of handling grief. You know, I mean, we find different ways. I think sometimes it works to sort of sink your passion into some other, or put some passion into something else.
Exactly.
And how about you, Susan? What are you up to? I know you're going to have a big national, I mean, a big event.
Well, we
gala in a
have on
couple of
October
years.
8th at the Lux Hotel in Brentwood, we have our big Friends of Grief Haven Live Your Best Life and fundraising event. And John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, is our
That's
speaker.
Fabulous.
And then in the spring of next year, we're going to have a family event, which is going to be really exciting. And then we'll start working on our big gala where we give our award.
Great.
And you better be coming.
If we want to find you, it's griefhaven.
Haven.org. Griefhaven.org.
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching the show today, and I want to thank these wonderful ladies for being on it, and our
Thank you for
audience
having
for
me.
being
Yes.
here. And it's
Thank
just
you.
been a wonderful show, and we've really enjoyed it. And I think
It's
you're
been
going to
really
be an
nice meeting you.
inspiration.
Oh, nice to meet you too.
Yeah, to everyone. And now we're going to close our show with Michael Davis singing "I Will Friend You."
I will friend you when you're feeling low, when it seems your dreams have all been turned to dust. I'll be there when the road is rough, when you've had enough and you just don't care. I'll be there. I will friend you when you're flying high, when the days are long and the nights are full of rest. I'll be there when you're at your best, when you've passed the test and you walk on air. I'll be there. I'll be there when the sun won't shine, to help you laugh away your fears. And when you finally think you've lost your mind, I'll remind you of the years we've been friends. I will friend you when your life is through, when you gave it all you had for the world to share. I'll be there to hear you say, I'm on my way, and I don't know where. I'll be there. I'll be there on that perfect day, when every wish has been fulfilled, and when you stop and close your eyes to pray, and your mind is very still. I'll be there.